So on tonight's Active Travel Cafe, we have Kevin Argue from Glasgow City Council, who'll be talking about their city network and the delivery of that. Thank you very much, Kevin, for coming along. First of all, though, we will start off with our regular crowdsourced news from around the country and some, occasionally a bit long, beyond. And so who would like to start us off? Was that a hand mark or
Yeah, I was trying to find the real hand, but I couldn't. Sorry, not the real hand.
The fake hand.
The fake hand. Yes, I was trying to find
go
the
for
fake.
a real one.
But I'll go for a real one. Yes. So although I'm working in Guildford, I'm also reporting on something that's been happening today, which is pretty poor news, really, from Surrey County Council. They had 2.8 million for a high quality route from the northeast corner of Guildford through a big roundabout called the Box Grove roundabout into the centre of Guildford. It was supposed to actually start work in January 2022, and there was a huge public meeting, which basically the cabinet member agreed that they wouldn't start work, and they've just agreed today to drop most of the scheme, to do the roundabout in the middle, but not to do any of the high quality protected routes either side of the roundabout, and to negotiate with ATE about what they'll do with the money that the 1.5 million or so that they would have been spending on the route. Now, that's literally happened this afternoon, this morning, which is disappointing, to put it mildly. The objections were mainly to the grounds of it would have taken them, they were going to close the entire road, the London road, for 6 months, and the residents kicked up a fuss about the closure for the works more than they did about the actual delivery, what would have been there once they'd finished.
Okay. Thanks.
Sorry to start with bad news.
Yeah, let's start with bad news. Maybe things will go up from there. Adam, what have you?
I attended the Salisbury Cogs conference, cycling conference, or active travel conference that they had. Phenomenal headline of speakers: Ian Walker, Rachel Aldred, Peter Walker. But they were during one of the presentations, which was by the cabinet member for transport, Carolyn Thomas for Wiltshire. In the Q&A at the end, she admitted that they just submitted their active travel capability score self-assessment, and said it was a number. They got a score of 1, so it's not very good for them. But that implies that every single highways authority across the England has now submitted that to Active Travel England, which means everybody should send out an FOI, or at least coordinate your FOIs. Because that the one thing about the self-assessment is it goes into detail as to what people believe or the council believes it's doing and what it's not doing. And so it's a very good way of you getting actually some sort of feedback. So that's the only news I've got.
Okay. Oh, we've got 2 new ones. Andy from York.
Right. Yes. Well, just to follow on from that, as it happens, I already submitted an FOI because I didn't know whether it was the score had come out or not. So I'll be ahead of a game on that one. Just to report that spent this morning in a discussion about with various stakeholder groups about the station frontage. We've got a Transforming Cities funded project there, which is already underway, but this is sort of last minute, looking at how some of the detailed design might be improved, some of the concerns about crossing points of cycle routes with pedestrian routes to bus stops and all that sort of thing. But that's work in progress. Just to report that.
Okay, and A. Kelly, I'm not sure what the A is.
Hi, it's Andy. Yeah, I'm over.
Andy as well. Okay.
Hi there. Yeah, yeah, I'm over in Wiltshire. Unfortunately, wasn't able to make the event in Salisbury, which did look really good. So I did actually catch a Zoom session there that was fed out with Councillor Thomas, the cabinet member, talking about transport, and I was quite interested to hear her talking about school streets, even though the county-wide LC whip in Wiltshire says that they will not be deploying any school streets anywhere, which is quite frustrating. But that wasn't what I wanted to talk about. So yeah, a few news items for me, all fairly local, I think. So my wife is a governor at Freshford School, just not far away. She held a question and answer event for a playing out event that she's organising next month, which the road's been closed for 2 hours outside the school, hopefully a precursor to a school street. There's been quite a lot of heated discussion about it, should I say, for a 2-hour closure, but it went very well on the whole, and that's all going to be well supported by the local community. So really good for that one. I've had some discussions with Wiltshire Council about the state of quite a steep hill near me called Winsley Hill that I use on a regular basis. It had some very deep, almost trenches in there. They refused to repair them because they weren't a problem for cars. But after me pressing them quite a bit, and potentially other people as well, they're now resurfacing the whole road, and that's been done this week. And then the other one I want to mention was there's actually a lot of gas main replacement going on near me, and that has resulted in for about 3 months. It started in the start of the year, still going on. It resulted in a low traffic neighbourhood of sorts while the work's going on. Cars aren't able to use that road apart from access, which is great. I've loved it and cycle along there every day. But I'm going to try on the back of that to actually go and get that some sort of modal filter onto that. So I would say try and use roadworks as a means to gather data. I've tried to they've got no traffic surveys being done, but I'm trying to get hold of the speed indicating device, registers the number of vehicles. As an anecdote, when I'm sort of using that road in the morning, about 20 vehicles I encounter either overtaking me or travelling towards me. That's done down to about 1 maximum currently. So you can get a feel for how many people are rat running along that road, which is pretty much everyone. So yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, that's good. We almost got an LTN because of roadworks. Sadly, for reasons it didn't quite work in Oxford, but it very nearly happened. The one that started with roadworks. Anyway, let me move on to Matthew.
Yeah, thank you. Just something that's happening, not exactly in Darlington, but it's how politics imperil active travel. So in Middlesbrough, there's a place called Linthorpe Road, which has a segregated cycle lane put in. It's a shopping street, lots of businesses there. It was put in under the auspices of an independent mayor, quite an interesting character. He's no longer with us. A Labour mayor got in on the promise to rip it out. So Labour campaigned in the mayoral election, in the local elections, to rip out the cycle lane, but of course he can't afford to take it out. He then said to the Tees Valley mayor, well, will you cough up? Because, of course, the wonderful thing about devolution here is that we're no longer a highways authority, a transport authority. So we used to bid to DfT for money as a local authority level, but now we have to bid into our mayoral authority in the Tees Valley region. They then sift through and send through what they want to go to the DfT. So there's another layer of politicking and power play there. So the Tees Valley mayor said, well, it's your fault. You're going to U-turn on your thing. He's now standing for election and looking very shaky. Ben Houchen is in private eye more often than Pinochet was at the height of his crimes. And so now Ben Houchen has had himself filmed walking down the cycle lane saying, I will take this out. I will pay to remove this, and meeting with a couple of shopkeepers who obviously were probably already failing businesses, and cost of living and Brexit have no longer been the final nail in the coffin, but of course they're pointing at the cycle lane. So just a salutary notice that elections are a way of getting the right politicians in power, but during the election campaign, they will throw cyclists under the bus and pedestrians under the bus, probably throw a bus under the bus as well if they could get hold of one. So there we are. That's what's happening in that
all sounds very classic. H, how are we doing? You're on mute at the moment.
What sorts of
Let's go to Ailey while H sorts his audio out.
Okay, thanks, Robin. I don't know if anybody from Camden is on, but Camden Council have recently put out what looks like a really strong consultation for their end of Clerkenwell Road. Now, this used to be called Clerkenwell Boulevard, and that has been renamed because that was too posh, and so now it's OSCR, which is what they call it. So this is a long, horrible road that goes from one horrible junction to another one from Camden down in Islington. And it's really great news that Camden have got such a strong consultation out. So we are supporting it. We're out leafleting tomorrow. And we hope that Islington will follow suit. They've got the slightly trickier part to do because there's more junctions and it's a narrower road, blah, 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 but it still needs fixing. There've been fatalities on that part of the road. Women have lost legs on there. So that's good news from Camden. I'll speak on their behalf. So there's some good news for you.
Thank you, Ailey. H, we've got a speaker from Glasgow today, so you're on home territory.
Yeah, well, I'm going to take Kevin to task on a few things because we've got one of the avenues projects that the local community council is asking. The road's been closed off since September and it's still not ready and it's still not open. And there are no diversions put in for cyclists. But that's it. We'll come to that after Kevin.
You can do that on a separate forum because we're not going to go down to every road in Glasgow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What is interesting is that Edinburgh's having the same sort of session on Thursday, which will probably be going online as well if Martin Noel gets it together as well. So we've got Laura Laker up to speak as well. So it could be quite interesting, that one.
That does sound like a good session. Okay, thank you. Thought we'd hear from you tonight. Great. And just before we switch over to Kevin, then I'll a little bit of news from Oxford, which is that we had our Oxfordshire budget passed. So there was already, there's quite a lot of roads and cycleways in the budget, but because we had a split in the coalition, and to get the budget passed, the Lib Dems and Greens had to team up with Labour again. Their old coalition members had left them, and Labour, we were wondering how Labour would take it and what they'd do, but actually what they insisted on was something with quite a lot of active travel in, and what they said is they want more school streets, more controlled parking zones, a feasibility study for vehicle-based charging based on vehicle categories and emissions, and a study on demand-responsive transport, and a £6 million Mini Holland project, which I know somebody on this call is very happy on because professional reasons, but I'll leave that to their discretion. Might make another topic here another time. But let us head north, all the way up the M6 to and the M8 to Glasgow. There's an inappropriate metaphor for a active travel conference call. And Kevin, over to you.
Hi, folks. So yeah, I'll just screen share just now. But yeah, you said M6, M74, then on to the M8, and then you'll find yourself in Glasgow. So if you bear with me, I'll just get my presentation. Where is it? Show windows. Too many things open, you see. Here we go. Right, okay, this should connect. If does it pull through for you all? Someone can give me a yes or no.
Yeah.
Right, smashing. Okay, so listen, thank you very much for inviting me. Claire reached out to me probably before Christmas, Claire Stocks, and offered me the opportunity to come along and talk about what we're doing in Glasgow, and I'm delighted to do so. So I'm Kevin Argue, the Sustainable Transport Group Manager at Glasgow City Council. I sit within a part of the organisation called Transport Planning and Delivery, within a wider part of the organisation called Neighbourhoods, Regeneration and Sustainability, NRS. So in transport planning and delivery, I work quite closely with my transport strategy colleagues, and I lead the delivery part of that. I oversee a team of 25, 27 once we finish recruitment, engineers, project managers, urban designers, technicians, transport planners, site supervisors, and so on. And our job really is overseeing a range of active travel and sustainable transport projects, from concept design all the way right through to delivery. We work closely with some client teams in the organisation, usually in my colleagues in the transport strategy team, who perhaps develop the outline, business case and concepts for projects, and then we take them forward. I know that H was it on the call earlier on, was keen to maybe talk about some of the avenues. The way the division of labour works in the city centre, I don't really have much to do with the avenues. I speak to some of the project, I have a look at some of the project designs and so on, but I take care of everything else. So effectively, there's what's in the city centre, the avenue stuff, which I have a bit of oversight with, connection with, and so on, but don't really involve with the day-to-day. I do everything else in the city. That's how it works with my team in terms of city network and the livable neighbourhoods. In terms of background, I noticed in the chat facility, my old friend Andrew Abbas, Andrew, hello, mentioned that my old role at Stirling Council is now advertised. So yeah, I began life working in local authority 16, 17 years ago. I am by trade, by background, a town planner or urban planner, and I started life in Eastern Berkshire Council, but very quickly got fed up with planning applications and planning strategy, because I wanted to be at the sharper end of delivery and design, and I had my ideas about how things should be taken forward. Managed to shoehorn my way into delivering a few projects in Eastern Berkshire before I really led on the Kirkintilloch Town Centre Master Plan, which was in essence an active travel scheme, an active travel and placemaking scheme. How do you bring people off of the canal, if you're familiar with Kirkintilloch, to bring them into the town centre off their bikes, which are a leisure route, and then use the town centre. I'm enormously proud of that as a project. At the time, as I'm sure many people on this call will be familiar with, you go through the pain of developing and designing a project that maybe the local community aren't massively comfortable with at the time. But I noticed last week in some local press up here that Kirkintilloch is now the #1 town in Scotland to live. So the investment in active travel, public realm, placemaking, in the longer term, it pays off. After a long time at Eastern Berkshire Council and developing a number of projects, I moved over to Stirling. And it was a very interesting time to join Stirling, a bit of a transformation period. I started there in 2018 and worked there until 2021. Obviously, COVID happened and it sort of blunted a bit of the progress, but I'm enormously proud that we oversaw the design process and procurement process to get a contractor in place to deliver the Walk Cycle Live Stirling project, which is truly transformational for Stirling. And if you're unfamiliar with Stirling, fully recommend going up and seeing it for yourself and seeing what the team got on the ground. And it's a great credit to the staff I left behind that they oversaw the project and got it delivered, and it's still being delivered. So anyway, so enough of the history. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Glasgow and why we do what we do. So in our strategies in Glasgow, it began life pre me joining the organisation. I joined in 2021, as I mentioned, but Glasgow began to think about the strategies they had in place and how it responded to the ever-changing world in terms of what we needed to do in terms of climate emergency and how people use the space and how people wish to travel, and also how do we reduce the car dominance in the city centre, and how do we get and change the relationship of our people and our citizens and how they access spaces, places, opportunities, amenity, and so on. So in 2019, the council held the Glasgow Connectivity Commission, and then that began to look at options and how severance plays a role in the city and how journeys could be better joined up and so on. That informed then the public conversation on transport in 2020, which was one of the most well engaged with consultations the city authorities ever ran. But came out of that, unsurprisingly, was the need by the residents of the city or the desire of the residents of the city to access active and sustainable transport on a scale that they had never done before. Following on from that, the Glasgow transport strategy was incepted, which is a spatial development framework for the transport in the city, in essence, and it's over 2 different parts. But underneath that, we have a range of sub-strategies that are really important. We have our active travel strategy, our city centre transport plan, and our Liveable Neighbourhoods programme. Now, I also mentioned that I am not necessarily responsible for the avenues. I will be responsible for all 3 of these in terms of the delivery area of it. So I'm currently working on the active travel strategy, which we'll get into in terms of the delivery of. I will be progressing elements of the people-friendly, the people-first zone, or the people-friendly zone that we're looking at in the city centre, which effectively is close to a car-free city centre as we can get, and also working with our Liveable Neighbourhoods programme in terms of, that approaching, not just 20-minute neighbourhoods, but how do we across our city provide people with the opportunities to access services, amenities, and things like that and reduce their need to travel unsustainably. So driving forward the active travel strategy and what are the real delivery mechanisms for it is the city network, which we'll look to, and also and then coupling with that is our travel behaviour change strategy as well. So what is our active travel strategy? Well, our active travel strategy really is around a number of themes, which is connectivity, people in place, and how we rebalance our streets and spaces. And these are all themes we'll be very well familiar with as active travel professionals or enthusiasts. How do we unlock change? And that's the behaviour change. How do we give people the opportunity? It's one thing to deliver infrastructure, but how do we give people the opportunity to access bikes and the skills and education to be able to do that? And then also, how do we think differently? And you're really talking about step change here. In Glasgow, and indeed elsewhere in Scotland, but in Glasgow, my staff are delivering change on a day-to-day basis, and the citizens and the residents of the city, we are living through change. The city is transforming. The city, we're going through a process. I mention this because, not to compare or so, and it is the aspiration that we could be on this level, but if you look at places like Copenhagen or Amsterdam, that didn't happen overnight. You look at what these cities were in the 70s and the 80s and so on, it was a journey, and they were through the wall first, as it were. Well, that's where we are in Glasgow at the moment, and we're delivering change on an incremental basis. But you're really going to see in the next year or two how this will be ramped up and the scale will be ramped up. I'll just click on the next slide. So, as I mentioned, we have our city network delivery plan. So, the active travel strategy sets out that we are going to do these themes and how we're going to do it. The city network plan is the rationale for it. So, I'm not going to talk too much down the side here about the other themes about how we are progressing this, but these are again well-trodden themes that we'll all be familiar with: socially just, and put a network in place and make sure that accessibility is there and modal shift and so on. But what are we doing? Well, we're really delivering 270 kilometres of segregated cycle infrastructure across the city, providing direct and coherent linkages from the varying communities and settlements of Glasgow to the city centre and linking it all up. This will be fully segregated, on carriageway, reallocated road space, active travel infrastructure that will be of the highest quality. We're already delivering it in locations and we'll continue to deliver it in locations. It is not without its challenges, as I'm sure you'll be aware, but that is what we're doing. So again, why are we doing it? So again, I'm not going to bullet point our way through these, but they're pretty self-explanatory. One of the common themes that people tell us that when we are anywhere in the UK, I would imagine that when you engage with them, like, why are you not choosing cycling as a viable everyday option? Well, safety comes up. So, you know, we're going to put the highest quality segregated cycle infrastructure on there and provide people with the safest routes possible. We're going to upgrade junctions to make sure that cyclists have throughout the city protected junction space, their own phase-on lights, etc. to go in. We're going to make sure that it is usable all year round. This is Scotland, after all, people. I know there's quite a lot of people from down south as well, and you get your bad weather down there too. But we get quite a lot of rain and snow, etc. in here. Well, this year, working with our maintenance colleagues, we're investing in the fleet to make sure that we're buying the multi-hog so that you can go in there and either clear snow or sleet or grit and go in and grit them, or go in and make sure that they're not like covered with silt and dirt and so on, and we keep them clean and usable all year round. We also want to make sure that we're inclusive all across the city, people of all abilities and can use it, and that women aren't disenfranchised from this. In Glasgow, we have recently, in the last year or so, passed our feminist perspective in town planning, and we're trying to embed that into everything that we do in terms of making sure that the infrastructure that we're designing and building is usable for all. And we also want to make sure that people have access to the city network throughout. Underpinning this and helping us is we've also developed a street space allocation framework. So think about this isn't a decision-making tool as such, but it's here to help officers identify conflict and how road can be reallocated. So road space, as we all know, is finite, and we have a number of things such as our public transport, which is a crucial part in getting people out of their private cars also. But also we need to think about businesses and residents and so on, and how we can inform our decision making there. So we've got a road space reallocation framework which helps split and help us do what we're doing. So the city network, in terms of taking it forward, we've split it into a number of delivery areas here, as you can see. So there is phase 0, as we can see down here, if I just move my cursor, is the current cityways and connecting projects. I'm presently in the process of delivering phases 0 and 1, and we're then working on phases 2 as well. This is phases 0 and 1 are either in construction and advanced design, getting to construction, and phase 2 is in design at the moment. So there is a number of things that are going to be happening, and these phases will aspirationally be delivered by 2025. So let's have a wee look at some of the projects that we're doing in Glasgow in terms of some of the infrastructure. Well, here we have our South City Way. So this is a £7 million project, which was the first of its kind in Glasgow. It takes the community up at Queen's Park in Dublin Hill, starting at the Queen's Park part of Glasgow, all the way into the city centre via the merchants into the Merchant City, Candle Rigs, if you're familiar with Glasgow. This was, you know, as you can see from the street, it was a busy thoroughfare, high street. At the outset of design in 2016, 2017, when this began, there were a number of spatial concerns in terms of how do you balance this up and make the street work. And then you can imagine there was a number of businesses and residents who were a bit perturbed by the idea of losing on-street parking and so on. However, the city took this forward in partnership with Sustrans and to get it delivered. Now, delivery was slowed due to COVID, as I'm sure happened in projects across the UK, but we're now on the final phase of the project to deliver high quality segregated cycle infrastructure all the way through from the one community in the south part of Glasgow into the city centre. And as you can see here, there is what was, and if you can see my cursor moving, this is Scotland's first protected junction that was put in Glasgow, and it was the first of its kind in Scotland, and is now like throughout the whole of the city, this type of thing. In fact, we do it on a much larger scale, and we'll see some examples of that later on. We have our South West City Way. This was also one of the earlier projects that we took forward as well, and we completed the final phase of it last year. This starts again in the city centre at the Tradeston part of Glasgow, is just over the river effectively, and joins that community via segregated cycle infrastructure all the way to one of the prominent museums in Glasgow and Pollock Country Park called the Burrell Collection. We designed the infrastructure, as you can see, is pretty functional. It goes through some industrial parts of Glasgow, but when we get up to where the Burrell Collection is, it's one of the more affluent suburbs of Glasgow, and we work quite closely with the planning colleagues there to make sure that we were designing, because it goes into a conservation area, like infrastructure that was in keeping with the vernacular of the area, because you go through industrial units to then very wide streets with large driveways where everybody has big cars and so on, how we reallocate the road space to connect it there. But a really popular project and something that we were delighted to complete. We also have our East City Way. Here again, we can see on screen, this is the Clyde Gateway Junction on East City Way. So the East City Way goes from the city centre of Glasgow, or will when it's complete, goes from the city centre of Glasgow to right on the boundary beside North Lanarkshire Council. It covers 7 kilometres of infrastructure, fully segregated and protected junctions throughout, and separate phases for peds and cyclists and so on. We've reallocated road widths, we've reduced crossing distances, updated signal works, but also crucially, if you know the space, this phase was delivered last year, 2023. We got on site in January and delivered phases 6 and 7 of this in time for the UCI Games to connect effectively Bridgeton Cross train station via segregated cycle infrastructure to the Sir Chris Hoy Velodrome at the Emirates Arena, and also directly across the road from it, Celtic Park. So we had to engage with Celtic and the police and so on to think about how we reallocate the road space, and how we also deliver an active travel infrastructure that also optimizes the performance of the junctions on certain 2 weekends, 2 Saturdays a month, in terms of when the traffic flows in there for 60,000 people visiting the stadium. We've delivered a highly successful project in this area, and we will be progressing the remaining phases of the project in the next year. We have one of our avenues there. So we have a programme of avenues that we're delivering through our City Deal. The City Deal is funded by the UK Government and Westminster Government and Glasgow City Council. The first of its kind was the Circuit Hall Street Avenue. If you're familiar with Circuit Hall Street, this is one of the main thoroughfares in Glasgow for nightlife, bars, restaurants, nightclubs and so on, teeming with students on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. When I was a student, this was 4 live lanes of traffic. It has now been fully reallocated to create the cycle infrastructure there, and a bi-directional with the buff colour through the high street, 27 street trees, continuous crossings throughout the side streets, and an upgrade. It is fair to say that this was the first of its kind in Glasgow, and Glasgow has learned from it as a design experience, and that has fed into other projects. But a well-known and well-loved project in the city, and certainly helps to inform some of the design decisions that we made then and that we've taken forward since. We have our Spaces for People projects. So we see the main square in Glasgow. This is the council building, Glasgow City Chambers, where I work in this building. We have the main square in Glasgow, St George's Square. George's Square was 2 sides of it were closed to traffic during the pandemic through the Spaces for People programme, whereby the City Council worked through a variety of temporary interventions that were so successful we have made permanent. So as you can see on the screen here, we across the city we created 47 kilometres of segregated cycle infrastructure that we are now sequentially working through the process to make permanent and upgrade to, because we put down, some of them were soft segregation, some of them were done by orcas and so on, some of them were done using planters that you can see here, but we're now going through the process of designing hard segregation and delivering that as part of our wider plans here. I think when we ran our Spaces for People consultation in 2021, overwhelmingly the residents of the city wanted all the schemes to be maintained. We took that to council, who voted for that to be, for the schemes to be retained, and we're now working through this process as part of our delivery plans on the city network. Cycle routes, large scale road space reallocations, and creation of some civic space across the city. Now, I'm largely there. I've spoken about our cycleways approaches that we've developed, but we also developed on top of that our connecting projects. And our connecting projects are large area-based projects to active travel infrastructure. So the first one that I'm going to talk about here is Connecting Woodside. Connecting Woodside began life as a mini Holland project there. The idea of linking the communities in this area through active travel infrastructure to the city centre and reallocating road space, creating green space and so on is the main drivers of this scheme. This project has been hugely successful. We have here, if you can see my cursor, Glasgow Road in 2022. This won the most innovative, it won the award for excellence in the Scottish Transport Awards for the most innovative active travel and placemaking project. And this is these are parts of it as well in terms of the reallocation of road space and creating of SUDs and green space in the community as well. The project is on its final phases. We anticipate taking site later on this summer on the St George's Road and Charing Cross side of the work, the project, which will be hugely significant for the city. It'll be, once we get to site, it'll be a 50+ week programme there, so basically a year of build, but will be not only a significant piece of infrastructure, but a significant signal to say that we're serious about this and that we're going to complete these projects. I wanted to mention to you the Connecting Liveable project. This project began life as a Sustrans street design project in the south side of Glasgow. The City Council took it in-house from there, and we progressed the design of it. And phase 1 of this project is presently on site and is currently funded through Transport Scotland's Active Travel Transformation Fund. Phase 1 will be complete by June, and we anticipate phase 2, the final phase, will be on site in the late summer. Phase 2 will incorporate lots of public realm upgrades as well as high quality cycle infrastructure, road space reallocation, connection to local schools and amenities in the college and so on. And like not just, and this is, I think, really important when you're making the point about active travel infrastructure and placemaking projects, is what's the betterment? Yes, like to many of us, the reallocation of road space and creation of cycle infrastructure is critically important. But what's the added value? And it's the green space, it's the public realm improvements, it's creation of civic space in the areas and using active travel as an opportunity to unlock change in areas, as well as, and then you begin supporting wider themes such as civic pride, economic development, regeneration. These are really important themes to hook into. We also have our Connecting Yorkhill and Kelvingrove project. This is getting on site later on this year as well. We anticipate it'll be June, July. Phase 1, hugely important project for us as well. It began life a real community-driven project 4 years ago. Was with the City Council and community working in partnership to develop the concepts. The council has now taken it forward, and we will be delivering that. You can see here, this is one of our temporary infrastructure projects on the Kelvin Way that will form part of this project that will be taken forward to permanence as well. And this has been a hugely popular project there in the city, so it's one we're delighted to be bringing forward to permanence and really excited to see. We have our Northeast Active Travel project, or Northeast Active Travel Route, known as NEATR. We're currently, we're actually doing a bit of site clearance work to prepare for site works commencing next week on this project. This project began life 2017, 2018, where consultation was undertaken with the local community. The need for some active travel was identified. We put in some temporary routes, and then the COVID pandemic happened. We then rolled out some more permanent routes, and during that process, and we're now in the process of upgrading them to full, to fully segregated cycle infrastructure, and through the development of some protected junctions and so on. This project, as I say, phase one of which will begin on site properly next week. A bit of site clearance work just now, and it will be complete by June this year. We also have some upcoming projects that are worth highlighting to you. We are in the design stage, working with our design consultants on the concepts for our North City network and our South City network, and I will be also leading on the Greater Govan City network project. These are all parts comprising key components of our city network in the first phases, and the projects that we've just spoken about here, when completed, will probably give us 80 kilometres plus of 80 kilometres plus of segregated cycle infrastructure, going towards the 270 kilometres of segregated cycling infrastructure that we're going to deliver. So really exciting time to be involved in it, and really transformative for the city. I also just wanted to talk to you a wee bit, whilst I had you here, about some of the other offers that we do in the city. So as well as active travel and sustainable transport infrastructure, my team will oversee a range of other initiatives, such as Nextbike, or bike share contract. We manage this contract with Nextbike, who are now owned by Tier, a German-based company. We have, as you can see on screen, almost 1,200 bikes, 220 e-bikes, more or less, 103 locations across the city. We've broken the 2 million hire threshold. We have, an average hire, per day of about 1,500. That's like the peak in summer normally. The average winter hire average is about 700 hires a day, and people are using them for 28 minutes. So you can see the journeys, and we're also able to see where the tracking on these bikes, where they're picked up and where they go, and people are using them for really functional everyday journeys about the city. It's not just recreational or leisure. We know that there's a real demand for this thing. So you see we've got 195 customers in Glasgow using this. Nextbike Tier tell me it's the largest bike hire scheme in the UK, out with London, and it's something, again, we're phenomenally proud of, but it shows the real need and demand in the city for the infrastructure that we're building. Also going with that is our secure on-street cycle parking project, which we have got in place with Cyclehook. We have, in the first 18 months of it, since I've been with the organisation, we put in 201 of these units in the city, which residents rent. They can store 6 bikes in each unit, and it's given us just over 1,200 storage spaces, and we're at 98% occupancy, with over 3,000 people on the waiting list. I'm currently working on a new contract with the team to get this expanded throughout the city, but honestly, as quick as we can put these on the ground, people are using them, which just shows the real need and demand on it. And also, it's a really, it's a nice looking unit, sleek design as well, but it occupies a car space, and it really makes a real statement, I feel, for this one thing occupying one car space can be used by 6 people. So we're looking at this as a model. So a couple of other things just before I hand over to you. There's a number of things that we've done that we're reasonably proud of as well. People may be aware of our bike bus, which has won some awards also, but this is real partnership working, community-driven initiative, but working with the council officers. So a school in the south side of Glasgow, Shawlands, where parents and the kids were wanting to ride to school, but they have to cross some busy junctions, and the infrastructure that they require isn't quite there yet. It will be in the fullness of time as we deliver the city network, but it's not yet. Working with the group, our signal technician team have provided the ride leader with effectively what we call a little clicker, which allows them to bring the bike bus, which is all the kids, to the key junctions, and then the ride leader takes control of the junction and can put arms of traffic on hold to allow enough green time for the children to get through safely. A real innovative approach with our other schools in the UK and Glasgow want to do it, and I understand that my colleagues in the traffic team are speaking to varying different cities and authorities across the UK. We also developed our cycle activated signage, which effectively you can see here. This is Janice in my team. This was Janice's idea. She had to get Transport Scotland through the TRSDG to sign a departure of this, because this sign does not exist before Janice came up with the idea. The whole idea is that it detects the cyclists on approaches on either way, and at the side road crossing, it flashes to then tell the driver who may be approaching that there is a cyclist on here and you must give way. This predated the changes to the highway code, and we like to include this as a standard design detail on our projects now. Also, just to highlight, as I'm sure you're all aware, we held the UCI Games in Glasgow and gave over our streets to competitive cycling. It was held Scotland-wide, but Glasgow was the major host city of it, and it was a wonderful event, but also showcased what our city can look like for holding these events, and it was something we were enormously proud to be involved with and support. I'm not going to rattle through these, but this is the sheer number of works that my service, my department, my team delivered in the last year. This is the stuff that we're currently already doing as well for the year ahead, and this is the projects that we've got in development. So it's all systems go, and this is what I like to finish on these last three slides because it really does demonstrate the scale that we're working at and the change that we're delivering, and why for me, in terms of the kind of work I do and what I feel passionate about and why I want to do what I do, why I feel I'm in the right place for that, because no other local authority in Scotland certainly would allow me the opportunity to deliver this amount of work and this amount of change, and it's just a bonus that I get to do it in a city I love. So really, thank you for inviting me along. Thank you for listening to me drone on, and happy to chat. I'll stop screen sharing now.
Fantastic, Kevin. Thank you for that great run through. I think you've made a lot of people feel quite envious and I wish they were in Glasgow. Some really great pictures of all the different cycle routes and in the city and linking into the city. And also you were ably, I don't know if you had an eye on the chat, but you were ably supported by Andrew from Stirling, who was dropping in a few links to support some of the points and questions that came up. But there were also lots of questions that arose, and I'm going to start with one from Ailey, which is where does all the money come from? Which is and also, I mean, is there a rough size of money for this? I think we know that Scotland, among the UK countries, has a bigger active travel budget. In fact, the Scotland active travel budget is now bigger than the England active travel budget, despite the size of the population. Where does the money come from?
Yeah, well, no, listen, we are, it's a really fantastic opportunity for us to deliver this kind of change. We are, at the moment, probably working in the profession in a bit of a golden era of funding in terms of that change. We're very fortunate the Scottish Government is backing that, and I'm also very fortunate that I work in a city authority with an administration who are keen to support that as well. So where does the money come from? Well, we have our national budget. The Transport Scotland have maintained a minimum commitment of, I think, £80 million towards active travel across there. And some of that exists in terms of direct funding straight to local authorities. Some of it is competitive funding that you have to bid for. So, and up until very, very recently, we in Scotland, I think it was a slightly different model in England, but in Scotland, you bid to Sustrans for your design and construction funding, and that was based on usually on a bit of a match funding model where the Sustrans would provide you 70% of the model of funding, and the local authority would have to provide the rest. That would be for construction funding. Design funding was 100% funded. Now, Transport Scotland have launched something called the Active Travel Infrastructure Fund. We are in a wee bit of a transition year as we sort of, I think, wrap up Sustrans in terms of the design funding and construction funding, and I think the aspiration is from 2025. We will move into Transport Scotland providing the funding, which will be in a mix of competitive funding and money direct in the hands of local authorities. But the money right in the hands of local authorities is based on assessment on your track record of delivery, your strategic plan and vision. Have you got the resources to do so, and so on. So we'd be very fortunate ourselves, like Glasgow and Edinburgh and local authorities like that, would be getting the money from that way. We also we're fortunate that Glasgow City Council has provided us a reasonably sized capital pot to use for match funding for these projects also.
Okay, great. And then a couple of questions about definitions of the type of interventions you've used. In terms of, you mentioned livable neighbourhoods, and so there's a couple of questions. Have you used things like low traffic neighbourhoods where you've stopped through traffic completely, or is it more traffic calming? And what kind of motor traffic reduction mechanisms have you used? Yeah, okay. So in terms of definition, there's a wee bit of what's in a name, right? Like there's a bit of that. And I think across the UK, when we're talking about mini Hollands, or we're talking about LTNs, or we're talking about 20-minute neighbourhoods or livable neighbourhoods, we're really talking about the same thing. We're talking about how to make a space more friendly for people and reduce the need to travel by car, right? So we in Glasgow, we have done a range of, yes to all of that. We've put filter permeability on streets. We've removed parking on street to create cycle infrastructure. We have reallocated road space and then used traffic regulation models like bus gates and so on to say, right, this is only for public transport and active travel that can go through a space. A whole range of methods. But, we are committed to a 30% reduction in vehicle kilometres driven in Glasgow also. So we're going through a full raft of things that are open to us, and yet, unapologetically, there's a bit of carrot and there's a bit of stick. There's what we can do in terms of the infrastructure and change the space, and how we can work with communities and provide them the education, the skills and the opportunity and all that good stuff. But how do we use what we can do to, the tools at our disposal through design or traffic regulation or working with partnership with communities and so on to create the conditions for that to happen. Okay, and then has that caused any kickback from, we'll call them the usual suspects around here, people who are still keen on using their cars to go everywhere? Of course it has, and we've had our fair share of challenging consultation and engagement events, and we have, I think
what it comes down to is that in council strategy, or even go higher than that, at national level, Transport Scotland and the Scottish Government have committed to a range of measures in terms of traffic reduction, net zero, reprioritisation of road space, what we call in Scotland our sustainable investment hierarchy, with the walking, wheeling and cycling at the very top, and public transport and so on, all the way right through to the private car at the bottom. That is the mechanism for decision making in Scotland. We've brought that into our regional and our local strategies, and ultimately our elected members and politicians have mandated council officers to deliver these changes for our communities. This isn't going to be easy, and it shouldn't be easy, because we're talking about step change in how we do things. And that is fundamentally where we are at the moment. So yeah, we have our challenging consultations. Yes, we deal with we have to have some difficult conversations with communities, or we have to have some difficult conversations with elected members, but we can get through them and deliver where there's a will and a need. I would also say the other side of that is that there is so much willingness and openness to change and support in Glasgow as well, that it's not all just one way. Yeah, there are some loud voices shouting negatively. There's plenty of positive voices shouting also. Hence why we're getting to deliver the stuff on the ground.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Very pragmatic approach. And right at the start, you were talking about a place, I think Kirkintilloch, where it's a great place, and active travel has made that case. Have you tracked that as a case study, and do you have any data about what's been delivered and the benefits and how much investment's gone into that?
Well, I haven't done it earlier in my career, and as we all get from projects that we're involved in, you wear the scars and you learn the lessons and all that kind of thing. And, and I was a bit younger and a bit wet behind the ears and pretty green and doing what I did there. But then the point, I guess, by using that as a story, as a little anecdote, as a story, is that, change doesn't happen instantly. And we delivered this project. We removed lots of parking from the street, reallocated road space, etc. A lot of public realm improvement and so on. And at the time, the community were not best pleased about it, in all honesty. And then I picked up on that story last week and thought, well, there you are. That's a real metric of change and success. I had actually meaning to reach out to old colleagues to find out, in terms of any other metrics, in terms of economic development, in terms of footfall and vacant units and so on, what are the measures of success there and so on, and even just other things like car volumes and speed counts and all that kind of thing. But I think though that over 10 years ago we did that, and now you're seeing the change, and I think there's a lesson for all of us in there when you're delivering projects and communities or politicians or so on are a bit up in arms about certain things, that change takes time.
Yeah, and also those metrics are also always valuable, but they, as you say, if they can't be measured for some years, then that's not helpful as you're building the things out. And then there were a couple of questions about a lot of two-way cycle tracks, which sometimes work and sometimes don't. What's your experience of those?
Yeah, well, I think that you would be frankly foolish to decide if there was a one-size-fits-all approach, and you need to look at each space as unique. Each, what's the space open to, and what's the needs of the street, and what's the needs of the community, what's the needs of the businesses. You need to weigh up these constituent stakeholders, look at what space you've got to play with, and then let that inform your design decisions. If you walk into a space and go, it has to be this, then you've already failed. Right, so you can't do that. So whereby I understand the arguments about unidirectional versus bidirectional, and why certain groups might favour one over another or so on, but you can't do that in terms of design. You have to go in there. There's no unique solution for each space. So I'm apologies. I'm giving you a wee bit of a politician's answer there, like saying I don't favour one nor the other, because I think one can be fine in one location and one could be fine. It might not be fine in another. If you understand what I'm saying, it's about taking each design or each approach that you're taking for each of the streets, on its own merits, and then using that space and the place to inform your design solution.
Okay, great. We're a little bit over time. Are you okay for a couple more minutes?
Yeah, can I happily stay for another 5 minutes or so? Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to stretch our welcome too much, but we've got a lot of questions. I'll try not to. I will be a bit selective, but very popular. Are you swapping notes with other councils, either across Scotland or more broadly?
Yeah, we are. We have a fantastic relationship with colleagues and other authorities. I have been fortunate enough to come down south and see some different infrastructure that other councils down south have put in, either in a professional capacity or coming down just on family holidays and so on there as well. And it's always something that we're keen to do. But yeah, we're always into idea sharing, knowledge sharing, best practice. We would never be arrogant enough to think we do it better than anyone else. What can we learn from others as well? And we're also happy to share our learning with anyone else from other cities, towns, etc. throughout the UK.
Great. And what's the overall timescale that you see? Is there an end to the project, or does
the city network, we have a date of by 2030 to deliver the city network by 2030. That is going to be challenging. There's no question about that, about the range. But we're trying to break it up. As I say, by 2025, we should hopefully have delivered another 80 kilometres of infrastructure. But I'm looking at other cities in the world. I think we're going pretty fast, right? But then I look at the scale of pace, the change that they've delivered in, say, Paris, for example. And since the pandemic, they have really ramped it up there and really changed their spaces. I was from work. I was there last year via work in Berlin. Berlin have, probably went down a pretty cheap and cheerful route compared to some of the infrastructure that we deliver here in Scotland or indeed the UK. But it's really functional and pragmatic, and they've delivered at real pace and change, and they're still doing it. So there are things that we can certainly learn in the UK from other authorities and other locations, I think.
Yeah, and you were talking about some of the temporary infrastructure you had there, and that there was a comment in the chat of some of your temporary stuff is better than some of our permanent stuff. Is that a deliberate move to build things on a temporary basis first and then make them permanent later?
So we did that through Spaces for People, which was Scotland's active travel response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and I believe you guys had a similar thing down south as well. But we did that working with Sustrans and Transport Scotland, and to get funding direct there to put infrastructure on the ground. We're now in the process of upgrading that. So some of that, using orcas or wands and things like that to get it in there to just segregate out. It's functional, but it's not, for me, not the optimum solution. I would always prefer to use a hard segregated curb unit if the space and place allowed us to do that. So, but in some locations, in some communities that we've got in Glasgow, we the Orca, the ReadyWell products and so on, they're reasonably functional. They do the job, and it can allow you to quickly get in that pace and deliver something on the ground that will give you a decent piece of infrastructure for the community.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Any issues with the disabled community?
Yeah, we have in Glasgow in the council as a participant, not the host of it. We have the Accessible and Inclusive Design Forum, where we try and work with the mobility and visibility impaired groups and so on, and visibility impairment groups and so on, and try and take them through the process and engage them on it. It is, the UK over, not without challenges, but it's been really valuable also, because it's really fed into our thinking about how we use tactiles, and not so. I think we all know in this call, or most people in this call should be aware of the tactile. The tactile guidance is exactly that. It's guidance there. So therefore, how do you use guidance? And UK wide, there is interpretations of this all over the UK and streetscapes over there. And then when you work with the mobility impaired or the visibility impaired groups, or the professional people who reorientate those who have lost sight to then use the space, that's when they'll tell you about, well, this approach might be wrong, or this approach might be wrong. But sometimes in terms of the professionals themselves, there might not be uniformity of what is the right thing to do. So working with varying different groups and people in the city to inform design process is valuable. But I mean, I wouldn't sit here and claim to say that we've got the silver bullet and we've got all parties happy with that. There, we continuously learn, we continuously try, and we continuously seek to improve. And we're big enough to acknowledge that if something's not quite right, we'll go back in and fix it thereafter. On one of the schemes in Glasgow, we certainly went in the last year or so and redid all the tactiles as a result of some of the feedback we got after it was built. So you have to be open to challenge and be willing to learn and improve.
Well, I think that's a great, really great attitude to have. And just as one last question then, which is, are you yet measuring results, increases in uptake of cycling, walking, wheeling?
Yeah, we are.
Above?
We are. I mean, we've got a number of stats on that might be easier to share, but we are, in terms of our infrastructure. If we take out with the city centre, I got one of my staff to pull the girls' info for me. Yeah, in 2022. In terms of number, if we take the accumulative total of routes, like some of the routes we just spoke about, the South City Way, the South West City Way, the East City Way, and connecting Woodside and so on. In 2022, this infrastructure had 72,000 rides on it, approximately, right? In terms of usage stats. And then in 2023, it was up to 92,000. So there is a real, and I think you can see with the user stats of the cycle hires schemes that we've got, and you can also see with the demand for the on-street parking as well, that it's a real growth in Glasgow. And yeah, one of the things you'll hear often when you're doing your chat, when you mention challenging consultations, right, or pushback. You do these events with the community and people go, but I never see anybody cycling. Why this isn't needed? I never see anybody cycling. Then you build it and it's blooming used.
Yes.
So if you give people safe and secure direct cycle infrastructure, that people that, we often talk about the idea of designing from the 8-year-old to the 80-year-old. Can the unaccompanied child use it, or would you let your grandparent use it? They'll be comfortable on their own using that infrastructure. You provide that infrastructure, it will be used. Design it well, locate it correct, give people priority, make people feel safe, it will be used.
I will emboss that in, I don't know, something. Take it to my councillors. Thank you very much, Kevin. That was a terrific run through the brilliant things you're doing up in Glasgow. I can't wait to go back. I was actually there on the day of the men's road race, visiting the tenement house on business, strangely enough. But I came out and found myself in a strangely trapped behind barriers, and it turned out to be the barriers for the UCI race, which was a complete bonus. Not completely unexpected, but I turned out to be in the right place at the right time. But that's another story. Thank you for that superb talk through, and I hope everyone enjoyed that. Next week, we have Izzy Romilly from the London Cycling Campaign, who will be talking about their women's campaign. I think many of you will have seen the powerful video that they put out a few weeks ago, and probably wondering how you combine the need to be frank about the challenges that women cyclists face with the desire to be encouraging to all users, but particularly women, to encourage them into cycling. And I'm sure that's all topics that will be discussed next week. Plus, Mark for Anti-Highwaymen will be back for another session of the good, the bad, and the interesting. So we will all look forward to that. In the meantime, have a very good week and enjoy your active travels. Goodbye.